Hey everybody, it's that time of the weekend. This week we're doing some more baking at home. I'm hoping that you're enjoying the videos and that they're at least informative. I don't know about enjoying maybe, but at least they're informative for you. I posted this for this week. I posted some videos on vanilla processing and growing and things like that. And I'm gonna keep doing that because I think it's kind of helpful to have a little information along the way as well. But I graded quite a few of your projects already on your scones and your pumpkin bread, and everything looks great so far. I think most of you guys are enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it, at least eating all the product and everything at home, and hopefully everything's going pretty smooth. If you are having any problems, don't forget to just send me an email, and hopefully I can help you out with whatever you're having troubles with. But this week we're going to be working with short dough. So we're going to make short dough cookies, and we're going to go through the method on that. I'm going to be making the small batch today. You guys have your own recipe. I've got my ingredients right here. I got my sugars, my vanillas, my eggs, butter, and my flour. Pretty easy recipe. It calls for us to use a dough hook. They want us to use a dough hook because that way we have a less chance of developing any gluten. And for the short dough, we want it to be nice and tender and crumbly. So using a short dough hook or the dough hook will help minimize our gluten development. So that's what we're going to use today. But the most important thing you need to remember about that is that if we're using a dough hook, we want to make sure our butter is room temperature. So my butter has been sitting out for a little bit. You can see it's pretty pliable, nice and soft. And if it's not, we're going to have some troubles. So I just washed my hands, and now I'm going to start adding my butter in here. Peel this off. Come on up a little closer, Kelly. I'm going to put it right in there. Dump my garbage in. Hope you guys are enjoying the class. Like I said, most of your videos been really, or your photos and your blogs been really good so far. We still have, I haven't looked today yet. Today, this is Sunday morning for me. And I have graded the majority of the ones that were turned in already, but I haven't looked since last night. So I'll be working on grading those probably today or tomorrow. But like I said, so far so good. Okay, so I got my butter and my sugar in there. I'm going to rinse my hands off real quick. Let's see here. So the short dough cookies, usually I would use these to make like tart shells for fruit tarts or key limes or lemon tarts or things like that. But you can also use these for cookies, and that's what I'm going to have you guys do this week. Valentine's Day is right around the corner. Okay, so I'm going to put my sugar in now on top of my butter. Can you see in there nice and close? Mm-hmm. It's going in there. So we're going to probably just make Valentine's cookies at our house today. I would have liked to probably blended my egg up a little bit instead of slopping it all over myself. Maybe use a bigger bowl next time or a bigger container. But yeah, I want you guys to maybe do some Valentine's cookies or whatever kind of cookies you want. Could be just round cutter cookies. Doesn't matter to me, but it's a good way to use this dough for something. Okay, I'm going to turn this mixer on now. And we're going to just blend that sugar and the eggs and the butter in there beautifully. The dough hook is kind of slower. It's a lot slower than using a paddle, really. In reality, you could use a paddle if you wanted to. You just have to make sure you don't overmix. Right now, we could really be using a paddle because there's no way of developing any gluten right now because there's just sugar and butter and eggs and vanilla in there. Make sure you're getting all your ingredients incorporated in there. I'm using this little spatula here to kind of get it mixed in nicely. I'll probably turn my speed up a little bit more. Otherwise, I might be sitting here for 5 minutes doing this. We don't want that. I just want to get the butter and the sugar and the vanilla all blended in nicely. Okay. So I was seeing some videos on how they produce vanilla. I thought it was pretty interesting. You know, vanilla comes from an orchid, and the flower flowers one day or blooms one day, and then the next day it's dead. So if you're going to pollinate the vanilla and you actually get a vanilla bean, it has to be the flower has to bloom and has to be pollinated all in one day. Kind of crazy. So the workers have to go through and look for the blooms all the time and then pollinate them in that one day that they're open. Okay, it looks pretty good. Like I said, you just want to make sure that the butter is nice and smooth. There's no chunks of butter. You can see it looks kind of broken really because the egg is in there and things like that. It's a little bit more liquid that the butter can hold in suspension. Now we're going to dump all our flour right in. And the flour is going to go right in. This is when we got to make sure we don't over mix. So we put our flour in. And we're just going to mix this for maybe 3 or 4 minutes until it all comes together. I think we're going to take a short break and we'll come back and when this is almost done and developed. Otherwise, you'll be sitting here watching me for 5 minutes. So we're going to pause it for a second. We'll come right back. Okay, so we're mixing with the dough hook for about 5-6 minutes. It does take a long time. And if you're having troubles with the dough getting incorporated, I'm using my spatula here to get the dough off the sides of the mixing bowl. You could switch over to a paddle if you really want to. But, see, my spatula's broken already. I'm going to get a real spatula out now. So sometimes you might have issues with making a dough like this with a dough hook because there's maybe not enough dough inside the bowl. So you can see here when the mixture's going, it's only grabbing the inside portions. So if you really want to, you can do something like what I'm doing right here with a spatula. Or you could really switch over to a dough hook, to a paddle if you want to. Just want to make sure you don't mix it for more than, with a paddle, I bet you have the whole process done in about 30 seconds. And we're not looking to develop gluten. We don't want gluten in this particular sense. I'm going to probably send you some videos on gluten development and you'll have a little better understanding of what I'm talking about. But gluten is what gives our baked good structure. So it's actually two proteins, gluten and gliadin, that are combined together when agitated with liquid, and then they form a structure to your baked good. Okay, so come on over here. We're going to take a look at our finished dough. You see it's nice and well blended. We want to make sure that there's no butter chunks in there at all. And we're going to get it all scraped out of the bowl. It's all uniformly mixed. As you take a good look at the dough, you can see that there's not any, I don't see any butter streaking. I'm going to pat this out and flatten it out. And I'm going to put it in the refrigerator real quick. The thinner I get it, the faster it'll cool down and become hard, because we want this to be like a Christmas cookie. And we want it to be like if you ever made Christmas cookies around Christmas time, usually you put your dough in the cooler, let it get firm, and then you roll it out, cut it out. And if it's not cold enough, it's really hard to work with. So I'm going to stick this in my cooler for about 30 minutes. All right, like that. And then we're going to start on our pie dough. So let's see here. We're going to take another short break and I'll come right back and we'll be all set up for pie dough. Okay, so the next recipe, now we're back and we're going to work on the flaky pie dough. So I sent you a lot of videos on pie dough because pie dough, man, is tough. It's one of the hardest things I think that you'll ever really make in the bakery. As a matter of fact, some people are really good at it, like my son Nick. Whenever he's around and we want to make pie, I say, Nick, I need 2 pie shells from you. Because he's really good at it and he makes it for me. So if I'm making it for you guys, I'm good at it too, but he's really good at it. So, but I like to make, I sent you probably 4 or 5 different videos on pie dough. Most of the pie doughs were more of a mealy kind of pie dough. You can make a flaky pie dough, a mealy pie dough. A mealy pie dough you want for maybe like a lemon meringue or a pumpkin pie, and maybe a flaky pie dough I might want for like an apple pie. Usually I do make flaky pie doughs. And I'm going to do my pie dough the way I usually do it. I sent you videos, 4 or 5 different methods or 4 or 5 different ways that people were making it. You choose which one you like and you make it that way. And tell me which one it was. Okay. And also in your assignments, there's going to be a section where I think you're going to have some extra pie dough left over. And I'd like you to go out and find some other alternatives for pie dough. What else can you do with this pie dough? I've got leftover pie dough. What am I going to do with it? You guys maybe putting your pie shell into a pie pan like this. If you don't have a pie pan like this, that's cool. I told you I wanted you to cut out roll out your dough, I think 1/8 of an inch thick, and cut like a 4-inch round circle, and then bake that off, and then break that up and tell me how it was, and let me see pictures of it. But if you've got a pie shell, go ahead and do a pie shell. I'm going to bake a pie shell today, and we're just going to bake it just like most of the video showed you. And then I'm going to probably put a lemon meringue pie filling in it, but I'm not going to do that till later. You're not even going to see that, but I'm telling you what I'm going to do with it. So I'm going to bake a pie shell, and then later on I'm going to do something with it. But for right now, all you're going to see is the baked pie shell. Okay, so here's our recipe right here. So we got this is a flaky pie dough. It doesn't mean it has to be flaky. Flakiness and mealy just refers to how far you cut your fat into it. Okay, so I want to make more of a mealy pie dough because I want to make a lemon pie out of it. Okay, but here's our ingredients right here. We've got 710 grams of bread flour, 10 grams of salt, 455 grams of cold unsalted butter, and 140 grams of cold lard, and then ice water. And I'm doing, let's see here, I'm doing a I'm doing a halftime recipe here, I think. Yeah, I'm just doing a halftime recipe. So I'm doing a halftime recipe just like you guys. So I've got my butter and my shortening. It's just Crisco. And I just got that out of the cooler 2 minutes ago. I got my flour and my salt and my ice water. I put 2/3 of a cup of water in there and I just put ice in on top of it. It's important to have cold ingredients, okay? So I'm gonna dump my flour in first. And then I'm putting my salt in. Again, I just wash my hands. I'm just gonna kind of blend these together because I wanna make sure my salt is uniformly incorporated, okay? And like I said, I usually make my pie dough by hand unless I'm making a big batch of it. Okay, so I usually like to mix mine by hand, but again, you can mix yours however you want to do it. I'm cutting chunks of butter like this and throwing it in. Kind of thin, not super thick. And I want to make sure it goes into the flour. I'm going to get a certain amount of butter in. I'm just going to toss it around a little bit because I don't want my butter sticking together. And that's the only reason I'm tossing it right now. So I finished cutting on my butter. Got another stick here I got to put in. Some recipes call for like lard, which I don't really have on hand very often, but you can go to a Winco. I see it at Winco all the time. I'm pretty sure it's in the baking aisle. And lard is actually the best because it gives you the flakiest product. So. But again, most Americans don't really use lard that often. But if you got lard and you want to use lard, you're going to get a nice flaky pie dough. But again, my butter is nice and cold. I'm tossing in to get the flour nice and covering it. There's all my butter. Then my lard. I'm going to kind of flatten that out a little bit like this. Okay. And that's all my fats. Now the way I like to do it, I'm just going to toss it in here like this. I'm going to make sure that all the fat pieces are covered with butter and they're not sticking together. Now I'm just going to start squeezing the fat like this with my hands in the nice big flakes and then dropping them back in. And that's how you kind of create a nice flaky pie dough. Because flakiness comes from the fact that you've got layers of dough and layers of fat. Hopefully you guys are going to be back in for the 8 class European pastries in about 6 weeks. And we'll make croissant dough. And it's the same idea. We're taking layers of dough. We make a dough. And we're taking that dough and making layers of dough and fat. And that's how you get a flaky croissant or some flaky puff pastry, or if you want a flaky pie dough. So now I've got most of the fat. I think it's kind of, all the pieces I cut in there are flattened out for the most part. And now I'm going to start going more like this, where I'm kind of just squeezing the dough, squeezing the flour and the shortening, and breaking it in. I might end up making a flaky pie dough because I like flaky pie doughs, but we'll see. If I want to make flaky pie dough, I'm almost done really. See you can take a good look and see all the fat in there. It's not chunks or like pieces like that I want to flatten that out. So when I get it all nice and flattened out, I think this is looking good for a flaky pie dough. So right now, basically, we have a bunch of fat and flour and salt in a bowl, basically. Okay. Then I'm going to take my ice water, and I put 2/3 of a cup. I'm going to measure it out again probably to make sure I got enough. That's the one thing, I said, it's really hard, man. It's hard making a good pie dough because every time you make it, it's a little bit different because every time I cut my fat in, I do it a little more or a little less, okay? And the fat is like a waterproof. If you got shortening on your hands, you can run water on it, it runs right off. Same thing here. So if I cut my fat in more one day than the next, the fat is covering the flour granules and preventing them from absorbing water. So if I make like a mealy pie dough where the fat is cut in a lot more, then it's not going to absorb as much water. So, and if I'm making a flaky pie dough, then I am going to I'm going to maybe need a little more water because I've got a lot more flour granules that are available to absorb the water. Okay, so I got my butter cut in the way I like. Take a look at it again. I'm going to add my water. I'm going to add most of my water in, but not all of it. I'm going to hold back a little bit. And I toss it like this because I don't want to compact it right away. So I want to toss it a little bit and have the water, give the starch granules the opportunity to absorb the water, okay? And when I see that if I look down the bottom of the bowl and there's not like a lot of dust, I know I'm almost ready to go, okay? I do have a little bit of water left over. I think I had a little bit too much water to begin with. I'm gonna add just a little bit more in. If you add too much water in, there's not much you can do about your toast. Too much water, you can't take the water out. You can't really just say, oh, let's add some more flour in, okay? In baking, we're exact science, and we don't want to start adding extra ingredients into our bowl. See, I'm kind of spinning the bowl, and I'm getting all the flour absorbed down at the bottom. I think that's looking pretty good. It looks pretty rough and pretty shaggy, but that's the way it should look. So I'm gonna get this out of the way. I didn't use all my water. And that's why I say it's really hard to make, so don't be, disappointed if your pie dough doesn't come out that great the first time around. So it's out of my bowl now. You can see it's pretty, doesn't look like any kind of, a dough that's come together yet, but all I got to really do now is kind of knead it together a little bit. And I know that some of the people maybe said they just kind of press their dough together and they refrigerate it. And you can refrigerate it. I'm going to knead my dough a little bit. See how I'm kneading? So I take my dough like this. I'm right hand, so I always work with my left hand. So I got a piece of dough in here. I'm going to fold it over my thumb and press it down. And I'm always going over some dough that needs to be incorporated. Just like that. Now work it around. I want to make sure I pick up all the pieces of the dough. Around like this. Okay. And my pie dough is done. Okay, I don't know if you can take a quick zoom in here. You can see, hopefully you can see it, but you can see it's not all uniform in color. There's streaks of fat going through it. And that's the way a flaky pie dough should look. Okay. So now you could put this in the cooler right away, which I'm going to put it in the cooler for a few minutes just to chill it down a little bit so it's a little bit colder. It gives a little bit of time for the starch granules to absorb the excess water that's in there, and it makes it a little easier to work with. So we're going to take another little break, and as I put that in the cooler, we'll come back in a couple minutes. Okay? Okay, so here's my pie dough. I weighed out about 18 ounces for this pie crust. It might be a little bit too much. I usually like to have a certain amount, like I like to take, okay, this 12 ounces is going to fit in this pie pan. This 18 ounces is going to fit in this pie pan. That way I don't have to re-roll this, because pie dough doesn't really re-roll very well because you develop gluten and things like that. Okay, so you notice I've got flour on my dough, both sides, flour on my bench. Got to make sure you've got plenty of flour. I've got my rolling pin, and you see that my dough is actually spinning a little bit as I'm rolling. Okay, I'm doing that because I'm exaggerating right now. I will go like this, rolling like this with a slight bend to it. This is an exaggeration. Then I'll turn it this way and roll it back like this. So I'm going like this the whole time. Even though I'm like exaggerating, usually it's more like something like this. And that helps me to spin the dough because I want to get a nice round piece of dough because my pan is round. And I want to make sure that my dough is sliding. If the dough isn't sliding, there's not enough flour underneath your pie shell. Okay, but we want to try and get a nice round pie shell. Okay, and I'm going to use my pan. I see I've got to go bigger yet. So I'm going to pick this up and make sure it's not sticking on the bottom. Rotating it over again. And you got to be kind of quick, because the longer you work at this, the softer your dough gets, and you don't really want a soft dough. You see I'm working right on the corner of my bench. That way I can get over here if I need to, or I can get over here if I need to, just with a quick stop. Okay, I think that looks pretty good size. If you want to take a look down here, you can see how thick my dough is. About 1/8 of an inch probably. It's coming off the bench nicely. I'm going to roll out just a little bit bigger because you can see the dough retracts a little bit. So when I roll something out, like retracting is when you stretch a rubber band and it snaps back. So we want to make sure we minimize that. So I'm going to roll up on my rolling pin, and I'm not just sitting my rolling pin or clunk. I'm holding it up kind of with my right hand. And I flip it up like this. Bring my pie pan over. Drape it on there nicely like this. And then I'm not just pressing down to get it in there. I'm going like this so that I get the pie dough to go down the sides of the pan nicely. I don't want to just press it down because that stretches the dough. And then my dough is probably gonna shrink back. Okay. So I'm gonna get a little knife out and do a little bit of trimming. Not a whole lot, because I like to have a nice crust, you know. I'm just gonna trim a little bit off wherever it needs to. Being careful not to cut my fingers. These ones are all about 1 inch over, and I think that's pretty good. Okay, so I've got just this little bit left over because, like I said earlier, I don't want to have to try and re-knead this piece of dough into any dough because it's going to develop gluten and it'll get tough that way. Okay, so now I've got my shell here. I've got my pie, my dough hanging over the edge a little bit. Now I'm taking it and folding it under. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe take a little below shot. So you fold it under like this until I get all the way around like that. Okay. In reality, you could just put the pie dough in the oven like this, you know. I know a lot of the videos talk about fluting, and I'll flute mine as well, but usually, you know, like the pie dough will look great, and then, let's see here, I'm just going to do it, let's see here. I'm going to do it like this because it's a simple one, like that. So I'm just kind of pinching it together, and this also pushes it over the edge a little bit, so it can kind of grip onto the outside edge. Because we don't want the pie dough to sag down. It's going to sag down a little bit. I can tell you can make it as beautiful as you want. But then when it goes in the oven, it always sags a little bit. So you can probably make the most beautiful pie dough in the world, but then when you bake it, it's going to not come out looking as nice, okay? So we got our pie shell like this. It's been quite a while since I even made a pie shell, really. Okay, I'm going to dot the bottoms with a fork, because we're going to bake this pie shell. This is going to be like a blind bake. I'm going to get some aluminum foil and put it in here. If you had some muslin or some cheesecloth, you put the cheesecloth in here, you put beans in here, or rice, or there's pie weights you can buy, but just like regular dried beans works great, or rice works great. I don't have any cheesecloth right now, so I'm going to use aluminum foil. But the reason we dot the bottom of the pan with the fork is because steam will form underneath the shell, and then it will, if there has no way to escape, it causes the shell to puff up. And we don't really want that. So we dot the bottom of the pie shell with a fork, and that'll help to prevent that. Then I'm going to get my aluminum foil out. And I just go to Costco to buy some aluminum foil. I'm going to take this, I'm going to be very careful. You could put this in the cooler for a little bit first to kind of prevent any disruption to the shell. And I'm kind of snugly putting it into the pan all the way around. And I'm going to crumple down this kind of parts here and kind of press it to the outside. I know in one of the videos they were talking about putting foil around the edges. I'm just going to keep an eye on my pie shell and make sure I don't have to worry about that. Oh, that should. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I'm actually going to grab a little bit of rice and pour it in there. Give me 1 second. This is probably not exactly very good use of my rice, but I've got a lot of this rice around. I'm going to pour this in here. And that's going to help keep my aluminum foil pressed up against the sides of the pan. Okay, so there's my pie shell. I'm going to pop that in the oven. And then I'm probably going to come back in about 20 minutes and see how it's going. Okay, and we're going to see, so we'll bake that for about 20 minutes. We're going to take another little short break. We're going to come back and check on our pie shell, and we're going to work on rolling out our short dough. And we'll be back in a couple minutes. What? Okay, so the pie shell is out now. It looks pretty good, but you can see it definitely sagged here a little bit. I put my weights in there and I baked it for about 20 minutes. And I lifted the weights out because it was starting to get golden brown around the edges. Probably could have left it in there for another 5 or 10 minutes. But when you have that aluminum foil and the weights in there, then this part down here doesn't really get as hit by the heat as much, so it looks kind of still raw. So you definitely have to take those pie weights out. I took mine out after about 20 minutes, I think, maybe a little bit too early because you can see it sagged right here, but it'll be all right. Like I said, and you can see that the edge here is definitely sagged a fair amount, so it doesn't look like as nice as it did look when you first went in, but you can see that it's a homemade pie. When you buy a pie from some places and every edge is crimped beautifully and it holds that edge the whole time, a machine made that, not a human being. So at least we know a human being made this, as imperfect as it might be, but it's all well baked. You can see that the bottom didn't rise too much, but it has puffed up. The dough has puffed up, so I know it's well baked. And underneath, I like to take a look underneath it too to make sure it's nice and golden brown as well. Hopefully you can see that. It's golden brown underneath there. You want to make sure it doesn't look doughy at all or whatever. This would be a great time to maybe put a quiche filling in here. There's a recipe for quiche in your book too. So you can make a quiche filling in here and pop that in right now and bake it. But that's our pie shell. And so you guys are done at this point, or even if you just cut out the 4-inch circle. And like I said, I still got some pie dough left over. And now we've got our short dough here too. So the short dough has been in the cooler for quite some time. Here's my leftover piece of pie dough. So you still have some pie dough left over that you can play around with. I actually put my short dough in the freezer for a little bit just to speed up the cooling down process. So here's my dough now. I can pick it up like this, and this is what I want to see. Okay, if it's falling apart, and then when I break it, it kind of cracks. And it's hard. And we need to do a little bit of work with that now. But that's the way it should be when we first start to work with it. Because we want it to be cold. If it's not cold, it's going to be really hard for you to work with. Okay? So just keep that in mind. I'm putting the rest of the dough that I'm not using back in the cooler so it can stay nice and chilly. And then I'm going to put some more flour down on my bench, and we're going to start rolling out some Valentine's cookies. So each one piece of these chunks of dough, I'm going to knead that up a little bit. So I'm just squeezing it with my hands. The bigger pieces you get, the harder it is to do. So I'm just going to make it malleable. So I give it a couple quick squeezes. Remember my video, I said that my hands are a little bit on the hot side, so I work as fast as humanly possible with the dough. So I'm just kind of, like I said, just want to make it malleable. And then I'm going to knead these pieces together in a minute. Sometimes if I got a lot of dough, I'll put it into the mixer with a dough hook and mix it like that. But that's if I'm doing like 50 pounds, 60 pounds. And you see I've got some flour on my bench. Got to make sure you've got flour on your bench or your dough is going to stick to it. But on the same token, we don't want to get so much flour into the dough that it alters the dough, the texture of it. And it's nice to have a bench that you can really lean on, you know. This bench is a little bit high, but I'm okay with it with my height. If you're a little bit shorter, man, if you've got like a kitchen table that's like 12 inches shorter or 10 inches shorter, because it makes a big difference. I can, you know, lean on top of it. I don't have to use my muscles as much as I'm just using my weight to lean into it. Okay, so I've been kneading this dough for about 30 seconds, and it's ready to go. I can flatten it out in my hands, and now it's ready to be rolled. If I had just taken it straight from the cooler and threw it on my bench and tried rolling out, the dough is just going to crack in a million pieces. So you've got to knead this dough first. Okay, now I'm going to take my rolling pin, making sure I got plenty of flour underneath. And these are like I said, would be like a Christmas cookie, so I'm going to make these kind of thicker. I want almost maybe like a 1/4 inch. So you see how thick that is like that? I think that's good. Okay. But when I'm rolling, I'm always turning the dough. I'm going all the way. Okay. I'm going different directions like this, because if I go just like this, I have a tendency to have either maybe too thin here or too thick here. So that's why I'm always going different directions. That way I'm getting a uniform thick product. Okay. At school, we'll have a sheeter to use, and the sheeter is an electronic rolling pin, and we could put 20 pounds of dough through at one time, and it goes all the way down from 30 millimeters all the way down to 1 millimeter, and your piece of dough will be uniform thickness the whole way. Perfect. Which is what we want, because we want it to be uniform, because if it's not, if like this area is here thinner and this area here is thicker, and we put these cookies all in the same sheet pan, then the ones that are thin are going to be done. The ones that are thick are going to be raw. And if we wait till the ones that are thick are done, the ones that are thin are going to be burnt. Okay, so the dough is nice and firm, nice and cold, easy to work with. You got to keep that in mind. Okay, because soft dough is going to make it really difficult for you. So whenever I'm working with doughs like this, I always chill it down as much as possible. And then, can't get one more. And then I work with it quickly. So we've probably been working here for probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes since I got out of the fridge. So now this piece of dough here, I'm just going to put back in the cooler. I'm going to get another sheet pan out. Or I'm just going to take this sheet pan. Now I'm going to put my cookies on this. If I want to be extra careful, which I usually like to do, I'm going to pick them up like this with my spatula. Because as my cookie gets softer, it's easy for me to dent the size of the cookie with my fingers. So if I pick them up like this, I'm not gonna dent the cookie at all. When I say dent, I mean like if I try picking up like this, you could get an indentation like that in there, and we don't want that. As the cookie gets softer, it's easier and easier to do that. So again, we're trying to work nice and quick. I pop these in the oven. This is probably going to bake for 15 minutes or so because they're pretty thick cookies. So put them in there until it's nice and golden brown. We'll pull them out, and then you guys can decorate them however you want. I'm sure you've done Christmas cookies in the past, so you could do, you know, I can see us doing some with powdered sugar and a little bit of water, or you can use egg whites. Color it. You can do white ones, you can do red ones. Leave it up to your own imagination. Show me what you can do. Okay, so our pie shell is done. Again, I'm gonna go and get, like I said, my mom used to buy just a lemon curd Jello pie mix from Jello. And that's what I'm gonna do, to be honest with you. Sometimes, you know, it's easy just to go do something out of the box. So it's just for us. I would never do this if I were selling this in the industry. But you are done if you get to this point. I'm gonna put the lemon filling in there, and then tomorrow I'll make, or later on tonight, I'll make a big meringue and burn it with my blowtorch, and we'll have lemon meringue pie. The cookies, I'm probably not gonna continue shooting anymore. I've got a couple of projects I gotta work on, but nice dark golden brown, everything I like, and then you're good for the go. Hopefully this has helped you out, and if you have any questions, send me emails, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do. Okay, you guys have a good weekend. See you later. Bye-bye.